We'll give everybody just a couple more minutes. I think people are still trickling in, so we'll wait just a few more minutes before we get started. All right, we will go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Macy Brink and I am with the IT company. And we have been doing these webinars with Jolynn for a little while now and have gotten such great feedback and everybody has seemed to really enjoy her insight and her knowledge. And so we are excited to have another one today. A couple months ago, we did Microsoft Excel, the basics 101. And we had such a great turnout from that and so many people requesting even more on it. So we are taking that a step further today, and we are doing Microsoft Excel beyond the basics. And so I am going to turn it over to Jolynn, and she is going to dive into some housekeeping items and then get going with the content.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Macy. So welcome everybody, as Macy said, to our Excel Beyond the Basics. There is in the chat a link to access the handout. So if you'd like to go ahead and open that, that would be great. And then also, just so everybody knows, we are recording. And if you have any questions along the way, you can put those in the chat. We'll try and get to them during the session, but otherwise we'll do some Q&A at the end as well. But as Macy said, I'm Jolynn, and we will go ahead and get started with our demonstration of Microsoft Excel. So when it comes to using Excel, I think that this is an application that everyone uses on a pretty regular basis. May not be as common for some people, but for me, I'm actually in Excel every single day, usually all day long. It's just like Outlook, Teams, those applications that we're in all the time. Excel for me is that as well. So what I want to start with here today is talking about some efficiencies that are built into Excel that I think can be important things to help you really be able to analyze your data quicker and easier. So starting out on the first page of the handout, you're going to find a feature called named ranges. When you are creating formulas, you could actually refer to a cell by using the name of the cell instead of the cell reference. So you know how normally we refer to a cell as the column letter and the row number. Like right now, I happen to be on cell A1. It says in the name box the name of the active cell. But sometimes you're going to want to copy a formula. And if you copy a formula that is referring to a cell that you don't want it to change that cell when you copy it, you would normally need to use dollar signs to lock that cell down, which that's actually called an absolute reference. If you name a cell, you do not have to worry about locking it down with the absolute reference. The named ranges become absolute. So that's one benefit of naming a cell. For me, a lot of times I'm using the same cells or range of cells over and over again in multiple analysis with different formulas and different things. Well, instead of me having to go back and reselecting that range over and over again, I could name it. Then it's easier for us to be able to really use it in a formula quicker, easier. Um, Lots of benefits to using named ranges, and I'll mention a few others as we go along. But there are some rules when it comes to naming the ranges. You can't put any spaces in the names. That's one of the big rules. Another one is the length of it cannot exceed 255 characters, but you probably wouldn't name it that long anyway. You could use underscore for a space, just so you know. Otherwise, I typically use uppercase, lowercase to kind of differentiate between words that I would be naming things, but you want to name it so you know what it is. So if you look at this references worksheet that I'm on, I just have a few salespeople and their total sales for the different quarters. And I'm going to want to be creating a column for their commission. And then also I need to know if they have met their sales goal. So in column F, there's on F1, it's the sales goal, which the sales goal is in column G. We have a commission rate of 4% also. I'm going to name both of those cells and use them in formulas. So first, I'm going to go to G2 and I'm going to name cell G2 commission rate. One way to do this is by clicking in the name box. So at the top left, if I click in the name box, I can type the name I want to give it. I'm going to name it commission rate, no spaces in the name. I'm going to press enter when I'm done. And now G2 is referred to as commission rate. Now, how do I use it in a formula? Well, I'm going to start on G5, create a formula that's going to take their total sales multiplied by the commission rate. So I'm going to do equal F5 asterisk, and I'm going to type CO. And when you type letters, when you're doing a formula, it brings up a list of functions that begin with those letters. But as you're going to see from here, the functions have the circle with the FX. But named ranges like this commission rate are giving you the squares. So you can see the difference between which one is which. I'm going to double click commission rate. So I'm basically saying take their total sales multiplied by that commission rate. I'm going to control enter to stay on that cell, and I will see the answer for the first person. I want the same thing for everyone else, so I'm going to copy that formula down. And I can do that because I'm using a named range, and it's an absolute reference. So each one of these formulas going down will say commission rate. Now, I'm going to do one more example of naming a cell. I'm going to go to G1, but I'm going to name it a little bit different just to show you another way to do this. I'm going to select F1 and G1. I'm selecting F1 and G1. I can then go to my formulas tab of the ribbon, and there is this group called defined names. This is where we can create, use, and manage our named ranges. I'm going to click on the icon create from selection. This is going to give me this window that says create names for the values, and it has a check mark in front of left column. What it's doing is it's looking at my selected cells and it's noticing that the left column has text. So it's going to use that text to name the cell G1. All I have to do is click OK. So now G1 is called sales underscore goal. And I can see that when I click on G1, the name box shows me the name of the cell. I can now use it in a formula in column G. And what I'm going to do is actually use an if function, which in your handout starts on page 2, technically. I'm talking about if functions. If functions are very common in Excel, where we can say, look at this, and if this matches my criteria, If that's true, I want you to do this. But if whatever it is false, do something else. Well, the example that I want to do is I want the computer to look at their total sales in column F. And if it is greater than or equal to the sales goal, I want it to say yes. But if it's not greater than or equal to the sales goal, I want it to say no. So I'm going to be on H5. I'm going to do equal I. It brings me up to the if function. I'm going to press my tab key. It starts the formula. Now, when I look at this, I've got the screen tip showing me it's looking for a logical test. And then it has optional items for value if true, value if false. If you get into a situation like this and you're not quite sure what you're supposed to do, you can click the FX. The formula icons area underneath the ribbon has the FX, or from the formulas tab of the ribbon. If you click FX, it opens up the function arguments window, which I call it the helper window, because sometimes when I'm doing a formula, I'm going to have a lot of arguments to it. And after each argument, you need a comma. And some of the arguments are text and they require quotes. So if you're here in the function arguments window, it will do extra things for us, like commas and quotes. And it gives us access to help. So my cursor is currently in the logical test, and in the middle of the window it's telling me what that means. Is the value or expression that can be evaluated as true or false? And if I still need additional help on this, I can go to the bottom left, click on help on this function. It's going to take me straight to the Excel help on the Microsoft website and show me all of the arguments. It gives you examples of how to use it. I really like this. But I'm going to go ahead and put in my logical test where I want it to look at F5 to see if it is greater than or equal to G1. As soon as I click G1, it adds in the named range sales goal. So when I look at this logical test, on the right-hand side, it's telling me the first one is actually true. So it gives me the answer right away. I'm going to click in that value if true, though, because what do I want it to do if it is true? I don't want it just to respond true or false. I want to actually have it say yes, or if it's false, I want it to say no. Automatically, there's going to be quotes around the yes and the no, and there will be commas to separate these three arguments. I'm going to click OK. Of course, my answer is going to be yes, because when I look at F5, it definitely is greater than or equal to the sales goal of 25,000. I can copy this formula down for other employees, and I'm going to see the first three are a yes, but the last two are no. So their total sales did not equal or exceed that 25,000. So just some examples of using named ranges with some formulas. But one more thing about named ranges, I'm going to go to the worksheet called dates as an example. And I'm going to go to cell J1 and I'm going to create a formula. I'm going to say equal 1,000 multiplied by CO. CO is going to bring up a list of functions or named ranges, and I'm going to double click commission rate. So basically, I can use a named range by default in any sheet within that workbook. So I can use commission rate on a different sheet. So I'm going to control enter and I'll see the answer of 40 because the commission rate was 40%. I'm sorry, 4%. Now, what if I needed to change that commission rate, but I'm not on the sheet that has that commission rate? Another benefit to naming ranges is to go to the name box. At the top left, that name box has a drop-down arrow. It will show you a list of the named ranges. If I click commission rate, it's going to jump me back to the worksheet directly to the cell that was named commission rate. If I change this to be 5.5%, which rounds up to 6, it will automatically adjust every formula that is using that named range, no matter which sheet it happens to be on. So just so you can see, these are some great options to be using. Now, I do want to continue with a few additional functions, including some if functions. I want to do a sum if, an average if, and a count if. These are very common as well. I would say everything that we're talking about is either in the top 5 or top 10 of the most common functions used in Excel. For me, these are really in the top 5. So let's see some examples of how to use these. I'm going to go to the worksheet called Lookup. And what I want to do from here is I'm just going to go over to the right-hand side here to G6 as an example. And I want to know, what is the total earnings if the region is South? So for all of the employees that are in the South region, what is their total earnings? Or I could say, what if they're in a specific department? What is their total earnings? So we could use a sum if to say, add these cells together if it matches our criteria. So I'm going to actually do it based on department and earnings. Now I'm going to name both of these columns of data. So I'm going to select department and earnings, and I'm going to go to the formulas tab. I'm going to click create from selection. I'm going to have it use the top row to name these columns. So it's going to use the department and the earnings headings to name these. I'm going to click OK. So now I can use them in formulas. So now I'm going to go back to G6. I'm going to do equal SU, equal SU. I'm going to double click sum if. When you look at the arguments for this, it first wants to know, what is the range of cells you want me to evaluate? That's going to be the department. I'm going to type a D, E, and you can see the named range, department. I'm going to double click, and you can see it automatically selected that range. Then I need a comma, and it wants me to enter the criteria. Let's say that I want to add together if the department is sales. I'm going to do quote sales quote. It doesn't have to have a capital S, even though the department does start with a capital S, but I do need to put the quotes around it because it is text, and I'm not in the function arguments window to do it for me. I'm going to put comma because now it wants to know, well, what is the range of cells you want to add together if the department is sales? I'm going to do earnings. So I'm going to type the letter E. I'm going to double click or press my tab on earnings, and I'm going to control enter. So what it did was it looked in the department column. If it says the word sales, it went to the column E under the earnings and automatically is adding those totals together. So the sum if is based on a criteria. Only add if it matches the criteria. I'm going to go to the next cell, H6, and I'm going to do an average if. Just like with the sum if, I want to know what is the average earnings if they're in the sales department. I'm going to start out with equal AV. I'm going to double click average if. From there, you can see the same arguments: range, criteria, and average range. So the range that I wanted to evaluate is department. I'm going to do DE. I'm going to double click department, comma. It wants to know, well, what is my criteria from that department column? I'm going to do sales, quote, sales, quote, comma. What range of cells do I want to get the average of? It's going to be earnings again. So I'm going to do an E. I'm going to press tab on earnings. I'm going to control enter so I stay on that cell and see the answer to the formula. So it's looking at the earnings, and if it's the sales department, it's giving me an average of those numbers. Pretty cool that it could do that. And it's so smart. But let me show you one more. I'm going to do a count if. So another very common function to use is a COUNTIF. So what this is basically referring to is we can count cells in a range that match a criteria. So what if I want to know, well, how many of these employees are actually in the sales department? I'm going to say I wanted to count the cells in the department column that say sales. So I'm going to do a count if equal CO, and I'm going to do a U to narrow that list down. And I'm going to double click count if. All it wants is, what is the range of cells that you want me to evaluate? That's going to be department, comma, what is my criteria? It's going to be sales. So I'm going to put in quote sales. I'm going to control enter. And there are 7 people in the sales department. So when we talk about that sum if, the average if, it's based on 7 people. Okay. Just so you're kind of seeing some additional formulas that you can be using beyond your standard sum, auto sum, average, etc. So these are ones that I think everybody should really have a good understanding as to what they are and how they work. So let's do just one more thing. I'll do a couple more functions here, but I want to go to on page 4 of your handout. It talks about a feature called Flash Fill. I'm going to go to the worksheet called Dates. And a flash fill is a very common action that we can do in Excel. And what I'm going to do is go to H4. So this is a bunch of employees, and in the office location, column G, there's some combined information. And in column H, I want to be able to pull out the last 4 numbers, and that's the extension for each employee. And I want it to automatically populate all the way down column H. So what I'm going to do is use, I'm going to type in to give the pattern to the computer. I'm going to type in the last 4 digits from column G, the extension number, 2099. I'm going to control enter. So I'm going to use a feature called the Flash Fill, which is on the data tab of the ribbon in the data tools group on the right. And basically it's going to look at my cell that I'm on, and it's going to look left and right in that row. And if it sees that data, it's going to say, well, I assume you want to do the same thing all the way down your list. So I'm going to click on the icon Flash Fill. It automatically looked and saw the number that I typed in column G. So it assumed I wanted to copy all of those last 4 digits from column G all the way down. And its assumption was right. That's exactly what I wanted it to do. I'm going to do the same thing in column I to pull out the building name. In column G, we have lab, central, HQ, etc. I'm going to give it the first one so it knows the pattern, and then I'm going to do the flash fill again, and it's going to automatically put in the names of the buildings coming from column G. So I'm going to type lab, L-A-B. I'm going to control enter again, and I'm going to click flash fill. So what it's doing then is saying, okay, I'm going to look left, I'm going to look right, and if I see that same thing, I'm going to fill it all the way down. Now, how did it know to not just do the first 3 characters? LAB versus central versus HQ, different number of characters. Well, it knows that I didn't put in that dash, where in column G, it's lab -02. If I had put in dash or -02, it would have followed the pattern for that as well. So it's actually very smart. But I want to show you how smart it really is by going to column A. On cell A4, we want to populate the people's first and last names. So I really want it to be first space last. And we have the last name and the first name in columns B and C. Notice they're uppercase. I don't want them to be uppercase. When I exported this information from our ERP system, it brought it in as uppercase. but I want it to be proper casing. I'm going to type it exactly how I want it. So I'm going to type the first person, Erica space Decker. And I did Control Enter. I capitalized the first letter of both the names. I put in the space to separate the two. Now I could have done last name, comma, space, first name, however it is you want to organize it. Now I'm going to click the flash fill. It's going to follow my pattern and do the same thing all the way down. This has saved me so much time. I used to use text to columns. I used to use concatenate. I used to use other text related functions, which by the way, if we go to the formulas tab in this function library group and click text, this saved me by doing flash fill. It saved me from having to use, in this last example, I would have had to use concatenate to combine the first and last names together. And I would have had to use the proper also to change the casing of the text. So we have a left, we have lowercase, uppercase, we have right, which is an example, and that extension in column H, I could have used the right formula to say from the right-hand side of G4, I want the last 4 characters. Flash fill does all of that for us. So it can save us a lot of time, and we can then be using Excel a little bit more efficiently. So anyway, just so you're aware of how that piece works. I'm actually going to go back to the lookup worksheet and back to a couple of formulas again. At the bottom of page 4, really going to pages 5 and 6, I want to talk about lookup functions. Now, in this worksheet, we have all this employee information. The employee ID, their name, region, department, and earnings. And what I actually want to do is I want to go to the search results in rows 3 through 6. And I want to go to cell B6 and I want to look up whatever the employee ID number is on cell A6. I want to find whatever employee ID number that is. And I want to populate the name in column B. So we can have the computer look up information for us out of a range of data. So if you had 600 employees, 6,000 employees, whatever the case would be, somebody calls up and says, I need to know the name and the department this employee is in. Well, what's the employee ID number? I can put in the employee ID number and these formulas can automatically populate the answers by looking them up within this range of cells. Now, if I were going to do this, I would probably name my ranges. So earlier, I already named department and earnings. I'm going to also name the employee ID, name, region. So I'm going to select these. I'm going to go to the create from selection again. I'm going to have it use the top row to name each of these columns and click OK so that I can use them in the formulas. So now I'm going to create a formula on B6 that is actually going to look up the employee ID number. Now, some of you might be familiar with the function called VLOOKUP. Very common to use VLOOKUP in the past to do a vertical lookup. So that's the one I'm going to do here on B6. I'm going to do equal the letter V. I'm going to double click VLOOKUP. This formula can look vertically across a range of data and locate information. First thing it wants to know is what is the lookup value? I want it to look up A6, comma. It wants to next know what is going to, oh, sorry, that was a period, comma. It wants to know the table array, which is a fancy way of really saying, what is the range of cells I'm going to find this employee ID number in? Well, in this, I need all of the cells within that range. So I'm going to select A10 through E49, my range of all of my employee information. That's where I need it to look. comma, in the formula, it wants to know what is the column index number. I have to actually count the columns across to know which column is going to provide the answer that I'm looking up. So the first column is the employee ID. Second column is the name. So it's the second column being the column index number. I'm going to do Control Enter, and it automatically will match whatever employee ID number I enter. It will find the name of that employee. But what if you had 40 columns going across? I personally wouldn't use VLOOKUP because I don't want to have to count the columns across to find which column I'm going to get the answer from. So if I did department, that would be the fourth column across. If I did earnings, that would be the fifth column across. So I don't want to have to worry about counting those columns across. And neither did Excel or other users of Excel. So Microsoft actually released, within the past year, a new function called an XLOOKUP. That starts on page 6 of your handout. I personally don't use VLOOKUP or HLOOKUP. HLOOKUP would go down in rows instead of across in columns to look up information. Instead, I use XLOOKUP because the XLOOKUP can do a vertical lookup or a horizontal lookup. It doesn't matter which direction you want to look up information. And it's much easier to use. So let me demonstrate that by doing the department. So I'm going to go to C6. I'm going to do equal the letter X. I'm going to double click XLOOKUP. It wants to know what is going to be my lookup value, just like the other formula. I'm going to click A6, comma. It wants to know what is my lookup array, meaning what is the column I'm going to find that lookup value. That's the employee ID number. So I'm going to do an E. I'm going to double click employee ID, and that's the column it's going to find the employee ID I'm looking up, comma. Now it just needs to know where's the answer coming from, which column provides the answer. Well, I'm looking up their department, so I'm going to say look in the department column. That's where the answer is going to come from. Control Enter, and I'm done. It will match up the employee ID number with the department. So it's looking up this person. If I wanted to look up the earnings, I could do a formula for that as well, using that XLOOKUP or the region, etc. But let me take this just a step further. I'm going to do the earnings. Well, actually, let me just do this department. So this department that I did the XLOOKUP with, one of the issues with the VLOOKUP or the XLOOKUP is what if we look up an employee that's not in our list? If you go to A6, I happen to have a drop-down arrow. So I could choose the list of employee ID numbers, whichever one I enter, it will automatically populate the answers. So super easy to find somebody and populate their answers. But I'm going to do an XLOOKUP again, but I'm going to actually want it to automatically find the name, the region, the department, and the earnings when it looks up the employee ID number. So I'm going to copy these headings, and I'm just going to paste them over on the right here, just so you can see that I can do that. And let me kind of make those a little bit wider here. So I want the computer to automatically look up all the related information. If I did a VLOOKUP, I would have to do 4 separate formulas to look up the name, the region, the department, and the earnings. And let's say that I want to look up the employee ID number, but it's going to be entered on J6. And I'm going to do E000 as the employee ID number that I want to look up. With an XLOOKUP, we have additional features that are not included with a VLOOKUP or an HLOOKUP. So I'm going to do equal X. I'm going to double click on XLOOKUP. I'm going to do the same thing that I did before, saying I want to look up this value. In this case, it's J6, comma, what is the table or what is my lookup array? I want to find it in the employee ID column. So I'm going to say, look in this named range, comma, where is the results going to come from? Well, I want name, region, department, and earnings, and I want them all at one time. I'm going to select B10 through E49. But I'm not going to just stop there. With this formula, I'm going to do a comma because it has a built-in error code, if not found. So if that employee ID number that we're looking up is not found, I can actually provide an actual error. I'm going to say, quote, employee ID not valid, quote. So I can have a built-in error. Otherwise, it gives us a generic error of hashtag value, hashtag whatever error, and that can be confusing to users and ourselves. I'm going to put in a comma because we also have some additional things with the XLOOKUP that we don't get with the V and the HLOOKUP. We can do an exact match. We can do a match that is the next smallest item or the next largest item, which we can't do with H or VLOOKUP, or we could do a wildcard match. I do want an exact match, so I'm going to do 0. There is one more argument, which is the search mode. I'll just show you what that means, and you don't have to memorize them because they come up, but we can have it search first to last, last to first, etc. I'm not going to include that because it's optional. I'm just going to do a control enter, and it's going to say employee ID not valid because there isn't an employee of E000. But if I put in a valid number, it's going to populate the name, the region, the department, and the earnings all at one time. I don't have to do separate formulas for them. So pretty amazing what that can do. Now, a lot of times for me, if I'm going to be doing different things in Excel, I want to use a table for my range of data. And I'm in the orders worksheet right now where I have a bunch of company orders. It's got the company name, the country that the company is in, who their salesperson was, what they ordered, etc. And in your handout, we have some information about using Excel tables starting on page 8 of your handout. I use Excel tables a lot because it's a great way for us to get multiple things in a range of data. So I'm clicked on a cell within my data source, my range of all these company orders, and I want formatting. I want to be able to do formulas. I want filtering and sorting capabilities, etc. I'm going to turn it into a table. By going to the Insert tab of the ribbon is one way. I can click the icon on the left-hand side of the ribbon for table. It's going to look at my range of data, and it shows it in this Create Table, my range. I'm just going to click OK. It automatically applies formatting to this range of cells. But if I don't like the formatting, I can go to the tab on the ribbon related to working with tables, the Table Design tab. I can go to the table styles on the right, where we get a gallery of choices, and I can change the formatting that it's using. If I scroll down on this list, it freezes the top row of my range of cells. That's part of being in a table. So instead of it saying A, B, C, D across the top, it says the names of the columns, company name, country, salesperson, etc. So we can always see the names of the columns. And in the top row, we have our filters. So we can go to the country, click on the drop down. I have sorting capabilities at the top, or I'm getting my unique list of all the different countries. So if I want to only see orders that were placed for Canada and USA, I could choose those. I unselected the select all, and I click in front of the countries I want to see and click OK. On the left-hand side, you're going to see blue numbers related to the rows that match the criteria of Canada or USA. At the status bar at the bottom left of your screen, it's going to tell you there's 427 records out of 1,464 total records that match the criteria. Great way to be able to limit what we're seeing. But I'm going to go back to that drop down for column B, and I'm going to clear the filter. So I bring back all of the different information in every row, because there's some other things that a table does. If you look at the table design tab of the ribbon, in the table style options group, I'm currently using banded rows. There's a checkbox in front of it. If I uncheck it, every other row doesn't look different. If I check it again, every other row is going to be emphasized depending on the style you picked, the formatting you picked. If I want to emphasize the first column or the last column, or I want banded columns instead of banded rows, we can have these features automatically change the formatting of your data. I really like banded rows because it's an easy way to be able to identify each individual row. So this is very similar to what I use on a pretty much daily basis. But I want to take this just a step further. I'm going to go to K1 and I'm going to create a sum, a regular sum of the extended prices. I want to create a formula to add together all those extended prices. I'm going to do that by clicking on Auto Sum. I started by clicking Auto Sum. Then I just need to put in what are the cells I wanted to add together. I'm clicking I2. I'm doing Shift Control down arrow to select all the way down that column. So it adds that to my formula, and I'm just going to do Control Enter. And when I look at that formula on K1, I can see the answer to adding all those extended prices together. But there's one more function I want to talk about, which is actually in your book under the sorting and filtering data. Subtotal is what I want to do. On page 11, it talks about the subtotal function. I'm going to go to L1 and create another formula to add together the extended prices. So I'm going to do basically the same thing, but I'm going to do that with a subtotal instead of a sum. I'm going to do equal SU. From the list of functions, I'm going to double click subtotal. It will give you a list of numbers that correspond with different functions. So if I want to get an average of the extended prices, or I want to get a max or a min or a count, etc., I can have the subtotal do all of these different types of functions. But the one I want is number 9. I want a sum. I'm going to double click 9-sum. It adds the number 9 to the formula. The number 9 is a hidden code to the computer to say we want to do a sum. So each number is a hidden code. I'm going to put in a comma because the second argument is, so what is the range of cells I want to add together? It's going to be the extended price. I'm going to click I2. I'm going to do Shift Control down arrow. It selects all the way down to the bottom. I'm going to Control Enter. That's all the subtotal needed. And by the way, when I do that Control Enter, if I'm down at the bottom of that list, I do Control Up arrow to jump back up to the top of that column. Just so you know, I'm using those keyboard shortcuts, which I use a lot of keyboard shortcuts. But you're going to see I'm getting exactly the same answer from both of those formulas. So why would I use one over the other? Well, let me show you. Let's say that within these orders, I only want to see the orders that have a quantity that is 60 or more. I'm going to go to the quantity column, column H, click on the down arrow for the filter. I'm not going to go to the individual values. I'm going to go to this number filter. When I hesitate, I get a cascading menu of all these different choices. I'm going to simply choose greater than or equal to. When you click on these, it will give you another window to enter your criteria. My criteria is greater than or equal to 60. I'm going to type 60 and click OK. Now it has filtered all of these orders to only show if the quantity was 60 or more. If you look at the formulas, the subtotal changes. I might still want to know the grand total of all of the orders. So the sum does that, but the subtotal function changes as you filter your data. I use this all the time. I think it is a very wonderful little feature. But what if I go back to my list and let's say that I only want to see the orders from USA that had that quantity of 60 or more? I can filter a filter. So I'm already filtered by one thing. I'm going to go to the country, click on that drop down, uncheck the select all, scroll down, click in front of USA, and click OK. So now I only have 33 records that match both criterias, and the subtotal has changed. So I'm only seeing USA orders that had a quantity of 60 or more. If I want to clear these formula or clear these filters, I could go to the data tab of the ribbon, and in the sort and filter group, I could click the clear icon to clear out all filters. Just so you know, you can do that. Very quick and easy. But I want to throw one more thing into this, because what if I'm going to be filtering by salesperson and by country, and I'm going to do that a lot? I'm going to go back to the ribbon, to the table design tab. And on the left-hand side of the ribbon in the tools group, I'm going to click this icon, insert slicer. A slicer window opens, this insert slicer. I'm going to click in front of country and salesperson and click OK. What it's going to give me is two separate windows showing all of the unique values for the country and the salesperson. These are slicer windows that allow us to filter by clicking on one of the items. So I'm on the country, by the way. I've clicked on the country slicer. If I look at my ribbon, I have a slicer tab on the ribbon. I could change this to be multiple columns. I could change the width, the height. I could change the button height, so it doesn't have to be quite so big. Just so you can kind of see, I could change it. And there's slicer styles. So each of my slicer windows could actually be a different color, just to make it easier to identify which one is which. But how do we use these? What if I only want to see the orders for Margaret Peacock? If I click the name Margaret Peacock in that slicer window, it instantly filtered my table. And by the way, when I look at the countries, notice that Norway and Portugal are gray shaded out. They're kind of faded out. That's because Margaret didn't have any orders in those countries, so I can't choose them. But what if I only want to see the orders for Margaret from the USA? I could click USA in the country slicer. I'm now filtered by USA and Margaret. But I changed my mind. I want to see Laura Callahan. If I click Laura Callahan, I'm still filtered by USA. I can only now see Laura Callahan's orders for USA. These slicers to me have saved me so much time and headache from having to go back and clear my filter and reapply my filter. It's just so much easier. It's a more efficient way to be utilizing our tables to analyze data. I'm going to go to the top right of the country slicer. There's a clear filter icon at the top right of both these slicer windows, where when you clear them, it brings back all the records. But what if I want to see more than one country? I'm going to filter by USA, but let's say I also want to see Canada. At the top right of the country slicer, I can click this multi-select icon, and now I can choose more than one country to see. Now I'm going to click Canada. So now I'm seeing USA and Canada. When I look at my list of salespeople, I could choose a salesperson to filter. Maybe I want Nancy. So now I'm just seeing orders for Nancy in the USA and Canada. If I clear the filter from both those slicers, it will bring back all the records. So I use tables a lot, and I love these slicers. Now, if I need to take that further, though, I would do pivot tables, but we can talk about those in a whole different session because that's a little bit more than regular tables. But this, to me, is a great tool to use. But let me jump to our last topic. I'm going to talk about charts. We actually have a lot of different ways that we can create charts in Excel. Charts start in your handout on page 11. I'm going to go back to the references worksheet. And from here, I want to create a chart that is going to give me all of the names of the employees and each quarter. I'm going to select A4 through E9. I could simply go to the bottom right, click on the icon called Quick Analysis, and it's going to analyze the range of cells I selected. It allows us to apply formatting to this range using conditional formatting. I could create charts. I could do totals, so it could automatically add a sum underneath my range. I could have it create a table or spark lines. I'm going to choose chart, and I'm going to click clustered chart. It's a clustered column chart, and it's going to put that chart in the middle of my worksheet. Charts are objects that sit on top of the cells, so we can click and drag and move it wherever you want it to go. And if you look at the ribbon, you have a chart design tab and a format tab. If you want to change how this chart looks, by default, this is how it's going to look, but you could go to the quick layout. This is pre-formatted options that can add different elements to your chart, like data tables, labels. It can move the legend, it can move the chart title or remove it. So a lot of times those are what I use to add and remove different things to my chart. And or I go to the chart styles. There is a gallery of choices on changing the appearance of your chart. So we can create a very professional looking chart in just 2 seconds or less. So just so you can see all these different choices that we have. Now, there are some icons on the right-hand side of your chart that you can be using as well, but just so you get a general idea of how you could create that chart. But I'm going to create another chart. I want to do a pie chart, and I'm going to select A4 through B9. A pie chart can only do one thing at a time. I could do all the salespeople and one of the quarters, or I could do one salesperson and all 4 quarters. I can't do all people in all quarters with a pie chart. So I'm just selecting A4 through B9 to do quarter 1. I'm going to go to the Insert tab of the ribbon to create this chart. I'm going to go to the charts group and click on the category for pie. And I'm going to choose 3D. It will automatically give me a 3D pie chart based on quarter 1. Once again, I'm going to get different tools on the ribbon I can be using, quick layouts or styles, to be able to add and remove different elements to my pie chart, all depending on what it is that I need it to look like. It is an object sitting on top of your cell, so you can click and drag and move it. You could use the circles on the outside edges to resize it. So if you need it to be bigger or smaller or whatever, you could. Or what if I want this to be on a different sheet? I could cut it, Control X. I could go to the sheet I want to put it and then just paste it. and it will paste my pie chart on any sheet I want. So just so you can see, you could do that. But I want to do one more chart before our time is up because it goes by so quickly. I'm going to go to this maps worksheet, and I want to create a chart based on all of these countries and their quarters their quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4 total sales for each country. We can go to the insert tab of the ribbon, and in the charts group, we can go to maps. And then I'm going to click filled map. It utilizes the internet to do this map. So if it comes up and says you need to enable it, click enable. Then you will have a chart that can be resized, of course, but it will show you the world. And it's going to highlight in a dark blue to light blue color to show the sales. But of course, you do have some options on your ribbon. So if you go to the ribbon, you can see that you have different styles you can be using. You could go to your quick layouts, and you could be adding in labels and different things as well. So just so you can see here in Excel, we also have maps that are charts. Or if I select B1 through C11, I could do a map based on USA states, cities, counties, whatever, by going back to my insert tab, clicking maps, and doing filled map again. I could get a map based on these states, where once again, I can use my chart styles. I could use my quick layouts so that I could be adding and removing different elements to my charts. So charts are not just for your normal data with pie charts, column charts, line charts, histograms, etc. We also have maps. There's even, just so you're aware, there's even the ability from your insert tab to use 3D maps. So lots of different choices when it comes to using these options. But one last thing I want to just mention is there are some new features in Excel. So if you have the updated version, let's say that for these states, I need to confirm the visitor counts. I'm going to do a checkbox in column D that I will be able to click to say I double check these figures. Very common to want to have a checkbox. Well, now in Excel, on the Insert tab of the ribbon, select cells, click the icon checkbox, and it will give you a checkbox in every cell that you had selected. So once I went back and verified the visitor counts, I can be checking these boxes to basically say, I'm checking these off my list. But one other quick thing that I want to show you that's new in Excel is on the View tab of the ribbon. It's called the navigation. From the show group, I'm going to click navigation. We can navigate our sheets by using the sheet tabs, of course, and the arrows, but this takes you further than that because we can navigate objects that are in each of our sheets. So if I go to the orders and I want to go to the table, I can go to the orders worksheet in the navigation pane and click table, and it selects that table. It also, from the references, I could go to a named range. So it takes objects that we're using, charts, pivot tables, etc., and named ranges, and allows us to quickly and easily navigate all of those. I use the navigation all the time now. I love that new feature. Now, of course, there's other new features in Excel that we'll get to when we do another session, but just wanted to mention these quickly before the end of our time. So we're at the end of our time, of course, already. So let me jump back to, excuse me, see if there was any questions, Macy. Sorry, I got a tickle. Any questions from the group today?
There are not currently any in the chat box, but if anybody has any and they would like to submit them, that would be, we have a couple minutes if you would like to do so.
Okay. Well, in the meantime, we can talk about the next one.
Yeah, thank you guys again for joining. Thank you, Jolynn. It was super insightful and super helpful. And so we are also going to be doing another webinar in November. The date will be November 13th. And this one is on Microsoft Word. So stay tuned for details on that and for registration. We will do the same thing we did for this one, where we post it on LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook. And then we will also send emails out as well once that registration is live.
Excellent.
It looks like we do not have any questions.
All right.
Thank you all again for joining us, and thank you, Jolynn.
Thanks. Hope to see you again. Bye, everyone.